Welcome to Defcon 3. I'm KT McFarland. Fighting continues on the Gaza Strip, but some are saying we're beginning to see a potential ceasefire. The Israelis are drawing down ground operations, although Hamas continues to lob missiles into the region. So joining me to make some sense of this, of what happens now, what happens next, are two men we talked to before. Commander Kirk Lippold, he's former U.S. Navy, former commander of the USS Cole, a destroyer that was famously in the region before September 11th, and Colonel Cedric Leighton, former colonel in the United States Air Force and president of Cedric Leighton Associates. So let me turn to you first, Navy guy, Kirk. And what do you think is happening in the region? Are we starting to see the beginning of the end of the fighting?
I don't think so yet, KT. I think what you're really seeing is an operational pause so that we can gather intelligence, or the Israelis can gather intelligence, determine what effect the fighting to this point has had. Clearly down in Rafah, there is intense fighting still going on right now. While they have destroyed a number of tunnels, while they have destroyed a number of rocket manufacturing and storage facilities, I think you're going to see the Israelis now pull back, assess what they have, determine whether the capability has in fact been degraded to a point that they're willing to ensure that no rockets can land in Israel. Otherwise, I think you're going to see an even more intense push, but it'll be more targeted, more pinpoint, and going after those specific facilities that support the Hamas war effort.
Well, let me turn to you. Colonel Leighton, what do you think? A couple more days or a couple more weeks?
Probably a couple more weeks and maybe even longer, KT, because I think that in this situation, I agree with Kurt that there's going to be an operational pause in this, and I also think that what is happening is there's going to be a diplomatic reassessment. The diplomatic alliances that surround Israel and Hamas, they are all being called into question at this particular point. When Secretary Kerry tried to use Qatar and Turkey as brokers in this particular effort to get a ceasefire for Gaza, that didn't quite work out. And so there are some significant interplays between the different Arab nations, Egypt, UAE, Saudi Arabia on one side, basically supporting Israel, and on the other side you've got Turkey, Qatar, and Hamas, and it's going to be a very different situation in the next few weeks than what we've seen before in the Middle East. So I don't think we can say that fighting is at an end. I do think that we're getting into a situation where fighting will pause, but fighting will continue. There'll be that low, smoldering ember that we're dealing with at this particular point.
Well, Commander, let me turn to you. Do you think that this is true, that there could be a potential realignment of the powers in the Middle East? Prime Minister Netanyahu said over the weekend that the fighting in Gaza, the situation has given rise to new possibilities. So is there something to this?
What I think you're seeing actually play out here with the fighting going on between Hamas and Israel is part of a larger strategic dialogue in the region, because when you look at it, this whole issue with the 3 teenagers that were kidnapped and brutally killed, left in a field, happened about 6 weeks before Iran came up on their July 20th deadline for the nuclear negotiations, which, of course, the Obama administration has now punted and kicked down the road 6 months to allow for further negotiations, conveniently until after the midterm elections. But I think what you're going to see is Iran continue to press, try and use Hamas as a distractor in the region so that people will focus more on what's going on in Israel rather than what is really going on, which is their relentless pursuit of a nuclear weapon. And that is what really has every major government within the Middle East very concerned right now, that they are continuing to do this. And the United States is allowing negotiations, per se, to continue.
Let me turn to you, Colonel Leighton. You're a strategic planner guy. What happens if, as the commander has implied, Iran moves on the path towards nuclear weapons? What happens to the entire dynamic and the entire region?
Well, the whole region becomes completely destabilized. And, when you look at Saudi Arabia, for example, Saudi Arabia is basically waiting to see what happens with Iran before it starts a nuclear program of its own. It's actually probably working on that in secret right now, but they are keeping it under wraps until they know what's going to happen with the Iranian nuclear situation and how the talks with Iran are going to work out. But they are very much prepared to to counter Iran in the nuclear side of things. We'll see a nuclear arms race, and we will see a realignment of forces within the Middle East, where there will be basically a pro and an anti-Iran bloc, and those blocs will be the ones that will be facing each other across the Persian Gulf. And that will portend a significant change in the way in which items are aligned, forces are aligned. The strategic interests of the United States, Russia, and China will also converge at this point, and they will converge in the sense that they will be bones of contention because China and Russia are going to support the Iranians, and that's going to be a significant factor in what goes forward from a foreign policy standpoint in the next few years, I believe.
Okay, let me turn to you, Commander Lippold. Who wins, who loses in this? And a quick, who do you think came out ahead?
Right now, I think that no one has come out ahead just yet. Israel has done nothing but push back and attempt to create some space so that they can, in fact, ensure the safety of their populace. Whether they get that in the long term, I think, is once again going to go back to the Middle East peace negotiations, which is a long-term objective. Short term, though, we have got to get Hamas into a box and stop the resupply from Iran.
Okay, well, that's it from the experts, and that's it for Defcon 3.